That is 5 losses in a row for the Indiana Pacers. They are not playing well right now, and they very much miss Tyrese Haliburton. Today, we'll talk about their loss in Oklahoma City, where they miss Haliburton the most, how they can adjust without him, and a lineup change I think they should make in his absence, all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're diving into the fifth straight Pacers loss. They drop another one, this time in OKC, and another ugly one at that. A big run sinks them. You've heard this story a few times if you've been watching or keeping up with the Pacers in the last 5 games. We'll talk about the game, their 5-game losing streak without Tyrese Haliburton, where they miss him, where they can do better without him. And at the end, a lineup change I think the Pacers need to make before Tyrese Haliburton returns, because what they're doing right now, clearly not working after their 3rd straight double-digit loss and their 5th straight loss in a row in OKC to the Thunder. Let's start there. Let's head over to the Paycom Center and talk about what the heck just happened. And this game was over before it started. 3.5 minutes into the game, the Thunder led 17-1, right? And something I've been talking about with this Pacers team in recent games is runs. They've been getting killed by unrecoverable runs, and they haven't had runs of their own, right? And I've talked about these a lot, but to reiterate, they played the Hawks last Friday, 14-0 run by the Hawks in the 3rd quarter. Pacers are up 99-90 in the 4th and give up another run. They lose by 2. They play the Grizzlies the next night, 29-9 run in the 2nd quarter. Grizzlies win by 18. They played the Bucks on Monday, 27-12 run in the 4th quarter for the Bucks. They win that game by 13, and then tonight, 17-1 to start the game. And from then on, you get the idea. Pacers and Thunder basically played an even game. Thunder actually win this time. Unlike most of these teams whose run is not the full picture. This time, the Thunder did do better than their run for the remainder of the game. But either way, the runs are killing the Pacers. This one was over before the game even got off the ground. And that made it one of the worst Pacers games of the year, because the Pacers were trying to adjust. They were trying to find a fire. They were looking for solutions, and they had to, because they were down by so much. And outside of one little stretch in the 2nd quarter, they never found it. And so I would classify this a 20-point loss in OKC, where they looked incredibly capable for about 7 or 8 minutes of play, as one of their worst losses of the year in terms of performance and general grip of how much they bring someone in to watch and look watchable. I would consider this up there with the loss in New Orleans by 20, the Brooklyn home game that they blew at the end when Brooklyn had nobody in there, and a couple of those losses on that 7-game road trip, Sacramento, Utah, Portland, come to mind. I think it's in that category, one of the worst performances they've had in terms of watchability, because they just looked uninterested for a lot of this game, right? You had Miles Turner kicking a chair. He was definitely into it, but couldn't get going, and other guys did not look like they were into it or could get going. Shots weren't falling. The passes weren't humming. Instead, a lot of the passes were actually going to the Thunder. All right, 23 turnovers for the Pacers in this game. That's their 2nd most in one game this season. And it's not like the Thunder are a good team. They're 500 now. They have the same record as the Pacers. Their same win percentage, I should say. But they should not be turning you over 23 times and completely dismantling you with that sort of play. And so that uninterested kind of play, that lethargic is a word I think I tweeted, the flat, sluggish, whatever you want to use, right? I think Carlisle agreed that they looked that way by his substitution pattern, right? And he had to sub early, right? When you're down 17-1 in 3.5 minutes, you have to send a message. So I think you sub 3 guys early, Duarte, McConnell, and I think Isaiah Jackson, maybe it was Osei Brissett, came in right away, right? So that's going to throw off your general game rotation, but Trevelin Queen was getting a ton of rotation minutes, and he played very well. We'll talk about him in a minute. But Trevelin Queen played a bunch. Terry Taylor was getting in there, and they never really recovered their rotation because it was so different, all because of that start. He was just searching for answers, and he had to. You cannot blame him at all for doing that. But they played so bad that they could never get the connected stuff out there. Lots of subbing, lots of newer lineups, and that 17-1 just really set the tone that the Pacers weren't going to be in this one. But the difference is, the other games that they've given up these runs, right? They played pretty well against Memphis in some of the 1st quarter and some of the 3rd quarter. They played pretty well against Milwaukee for almost all the game until the end. They played well against Atlanta outside of that 3rd quarter stretch and some of the 4th. In this game, the Pacers only played well for a tiny bit of time, right? Typically, they've been playing well outside of the stretch. This time, they only played well for a tiny bit of time, and that's in that second quarter burst where they cut it down to 3 before the Thunder extended their lead again. That was the only stretch of the game where you felt like the Pacers were playing pretty well. They danced around an okay stretch of play to start the third quarter, but you mostly felt like the Thunder were in control and dominating the whole time. The Pacers never led. The Thunder led wire to wire. They had a 29-point lead, 14-point runs. Like, it was just, it was awful. The Pacers, quite frankly, looked awful. They could not stop OKC at all. Like, simple back cuts were working the entire game, and that was part of the Thunder finishing with 40 assists. 40 assists. That's a crazy number. 41 assists. The box score has been updated to say 41 assists. I read 40, which tied their franchise record. If it's 41, which is what NBA.com says now, that is a Thunder franchise record. So I had 40 up, but I just refreshed the page. That is a franchise record. The Pacers this season best is 34, and they're a passing like crazy team. They're one of the highest passing number of passes per game league in the team in the league, excuse me. So credit to the Thunder. They played really well, but 40 assists, 41 assists is just a crazy level of tearing apart a defense that, is ball watching too much, is not engaged with the scouting report, not playing well. And some of it also is that the Pacers went to zone, and it worked for a little bit. In the second quarter stretch that they were playing well, they were in zone until it didn't. The Thunder figured it out. And that's the theme for a lot of the stuff in this game that sort of influenced the final result, right? The zone defense, the Pacers look good. It was great. Terry Taylor's the 5 in this, and it's working until it doesn't. They tried some effort lineups. Trevor and Queen in there. Like I said, Terry Taylor in there. Goga's getting some fourth quarter run. They tried effort lineups, and they worked until they didn't. They were fine until OKC figured out, hey, we just got to play our game and we'll win, right? The starters were completely miserable. They never worked. They don't get a bit where I say they worked until they didn't. They were just miserable. Andrew Nembhard played an all right game. He finally finished some of those shots I was talking about yesterday that are a little aggressive, I feel like, where he's taking these off the dribble shots in the mid-range or not quite all the way to the rim, but he made them in this game. He had 18 points. The rest of the starters, 13 from Mathurin on 10 shots. He shot 40%. Nesmith went 3 for 8 for 9 points. Turner went 3 for 4 for 7 points, and Buddy Hield went 1 for 4 for 3 points. All very rough, right? You're never going to win a game when those guys combined for 32 points. Nesmith, Turner, Mathurin, and Hield combined for 32 points. That's just not going to get it done. Right? Those guys were not good enough. That's why there was a lot of subbing. That group barely played together. We will talk about them heavily. That specific unit will heavily be focused on in the final segment today. It's just a broken team right now in this game. Specifically, they were, but they're really broken. Missing Haliburton, of course. We'll talk about that more in the second segment. But they had a few guys that kind of found success in this game. But in general, just a lethargic performance for the Pacers. Certainly a frustrating performance, right? You could tell, like I mentioned earlier, with Turner kicking the chair, with some of their reactions to their start, and guys just in general just hanging heads. How are we getting blown out this bad? They looked completely miserable in this game. It was gross. They had a ton of turnovers, the second most of the season. Like, they've just got to win the possession battle to cut down the variance. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse saying that every single time I talk about this team right now. But without your best player and one who makes your efficiency 5 percentage points better in terms of effective field goal percentage when he's in the game, if he's gone, you have to maximize the number of possessions you have. 23 turnovers. They will never win that way. Never. They shot 41.5%. The Thunder shot 50.5%. 41.5% from the field is pretty rough. That is in the bottom 8 games for the Pacers this season. Half of their bottom 8 shooting percentage games have come in like the last week, right? They can't finish plays without Haliburton. And that all said, they have to have the ball more often in that case. If they can't be efficient, they have to maximize their number of chances to actually score. Turning it over 23 times will make that happen. They did win the rebounding battle. That gave them a slightly better chance. 20 offensive rebounds, though, was not enough for them to win this game. So Pacers are struggling. We'll talk in the next segment about how they've been struggling, where they miss Haliburton the most. But two things to highlight from this game or note. Keep these in your back pocket, if you will. Number one, Pacers played 12 guys in this game, 12-man rotation from Rick Carlisle. And none of those 12 players were Jalen Smith. Dude did not play coach's decision for Jalen Smith. Isaiah Jackson was the backup 5. He played 17 and a half minutes, 11 points on 4 for 6 shooting, 7 boards. Typical Isaiah Jackson stuff. But they went to Terry Taylor for 16 and a half minutes. He got rotation time in the second quarter. They played Goga down the stretch. Jalen Smith did not play. That is something to keep an eye on. What's going on with that front court rotation? Is he going to be back in the lineup in a future game? We'll see, but I thought that was very noteworthy because to my knowledge, unless I totally missed something, he's healthy. Number 2, Trevelin Queen. Welcome to the Pacers. He's had some appearances, 3 prior to this game. Trevelin Queen had an awesome game. He was probably the standout performer, especially compared to expectations. He was the best player probably compared to expectations. If you don't know who Trevelin Queen is, he's on a 2-way contract. And again, he's only appeared in 3 games for the Pacers the entire season to date. So I don't fault you for not knowing exactly who he is or what he can do. He played 23 minutes in this game. He had played 13 minutes, was the most he'd played a game for the Pacers before this. He had 13 points. That was a season high. 9 rebounds, a career high. 1 assist, 1 steal, and 3 blocks. Also a career high. And he played almost half the game, right? 23 minutes, 15 seconds. He was a plus 12. So the Pacers lost by 32 in the half the game that he wasn't in there. So Trevelin Queen stealing minutes because the Pacers needed effort and energy was really noteworthy and good. And perhaps if they continue to need some wing guard, hybrid minutes without Haliburton, they'll try to sneak in a few with him. I don't know. It might have just been they look awful in OKC. Let's try this guy kind of thing. But we'll see where it turns out because he certainly made me write his name down and put him in my game story because he was so effective at times in this game. So credit to Trevelin Queen for making all that happen. Now, though, that's 5 losses in a row for the Pacers. What is going on? Look, the obvious thing. Tyrese Haliburton's out. We can all see that. We all know how that's impacting them. But I want to dive into where they miss him, what sort of effect his absence has on their struggles so far. So let's talk about that in the second segment. Before we do that, though, let me talk to you guys about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bars ever. They're in stores now, too. You got to try them. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all of the fat and calories. That is what Built Bar can get you. You just got through the holidays. If you're like me, your goal is to eat a little better, get a little healthier this year, going to the gym every day. If you're like me and in that situation, you don't want to compromise taste when you're eating, but you still need healthy. That is where Built Bar comes in. They're so delicious. They basically taste like a candy bar, but they're good for you, right? 100% covered in real chocolate. They have peanut butter brownie flavor. It's my favorite. That's delicious, but also coconut, almond, churro, a bunch of fruit flavors, cookies and cream, double chocolate, brownie batter, churro. I could go on and on. There's a bunch. But not only are they healthy and have candy taste and all these great flavors, they're also awesome for you with great macros, right? 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And you don't have to wait around to order them from their website anymore. You can get them at Walmart or Sam's Club. 4 bar boxes in Walmart, 13 bar boxes in Sam's Club. You've got to check them out. Built.com is the way to go if you want to order them, or in stores now. Built bars. Go try them yourself. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, jump on over to Locked On Thunder. Listen to Rylan Stiles, who was on this show yesterday, talk about this game from the Thunder perspective. A franchise record in assists, a feel-good win as the Thunder get back to 500. The Thunder are half a game out of the playoffs, not the play-in, the playoffs. Holy moly. They're rolling. Rylan will have that all for you over there. Here, we're talking about the Pacers, who are playing the anti-Thunder right now. 5 consecutive losses. It was clear without Tyrese Haliburton, they were going to be worse, right? I talked about that last week after it was announced he would be out for a couple weeks. It was clear they're going to be worse. I said that they could go on a struggling stretch here. I don't remember my exact wording, but I said I thought they could, kind of pull like a Warriors without Steph and be okay, right? They could survive this. They could be more competitive. And then that night after I said that, they played a competitive game against Atlanta, and that made me feel like, yeah, okay, they've got this. They've been awful, pretty awful ever since. The Bucks game had some encouraging moments, I should say, but 5 losses in a row is 5 losses in a row, and the Pacers are clearly much, much worse than without Haliburton. That's obvious. We knew that beforehand, but seeing it is so jarring. His All-Star case might honestly be better now than it was before this injury, right? They were 22 and 17 when he played prior to the injury. Now they're 500, right? Like clearly he is huge for this team, but I thought they'd be more competitive, and they were not at all in this game. And like when you really dive into this injury, right? It's not just losing Tyrese Haliburton is not just like, well, you fill him with someone else, right? I talked about this a little when I was previewing what the injury could mean, but now you've seen it and talking about it in the context of what the Pacers have done. You can read the stats and go, oh, wow, you really see it, right? It's not just the gap between, okay, here's Tyrese Haliburton and here's the new starter, Andrew Nembhard. It's not just the gap you lose in talent right there. It's also 2 other things. It's also, 1, the drop from Andrew Nembhard to whatever wing is on there, Benedict Mathurin, someone off the bench at the time, whoever is in the game. It's the drop between Nembhard to them because Nembhard fit very well with the starting lineup. The Pacers finally figured out how to start games when Andrew Nembhard became a starter on the wing, not at the one, right? So that's one drop, is the Haliburton to Nembhard drop, also the Nembhard to whatever wing. But also you get a drop in production for every other player who is no longer benefiting from playing with Tyrese Haliburton. And that's where I think you've seen this all kind of rear its ugly head is, let's start with Buddy Hield. The most huge example of this, obviously, right? Buddy Hield's chemistry with Haliburton is fantastic. They've played together their entire careers. Buddy Hield has great stats and great shooting when he plays with Tyrese Haliburton. In the game since Haliburton's injury, Buddy Hield had a 5-point game, and the only game of the season he made 0 threes against Memphis. He had 18 points on 15 shots against Atlanta. He had 18 points on 15 shots against Milwaukee. And then tonight, he had 3 points on 1 make in 19 minutes against OKC, and his defense in this game was atrocious. So he has really struggled without a guy that he has great chemistry with that's helped him be really effective. They play off of each other very, very well. Buddy Hield looks awesome when he's playing with Tyrese Haliburton. He's looked terrible. So now you've lost Haliburton, and you've lost some of what makes Buddy Hield so good. That's a big loss, right? Miles Turner, who was awesome in Milwaukee, 30 points, maybe the team's best player that night. In fact, probably the team's best player that night, is still dealing with rough entry passes. Very first possession, Pacers turned it over on a bad entry pass to Turner, right? Things are harder to get him going. He only took 4 shots in this game. He was being guarded by Kendrick Williams. They couldn't find more shots for him. They couldn't get him the ball in advantageous positions. Kendrick Williams is a good player. He had a double-double in this game, but Turner's way taller than him, right? There should be more advantages there, but they couldn't feed him the right ways, right? You could go through this forever. Nembhard used to be a guy passed to a lot. I went through the shooting percentages with him on yesterday's show in the final segment, right? His 2-point percentage is 20% higher when he plays with Tyrese Haliburton than instead of without. His 3-point percentage is higher, right? Now he's doing the passing himself. He's got to self-create. His percentages drop. Neesmith, obviously, the same thing. Worse setups from his teammates. Timing's all different because it's a different lineup. And Mathurin is another guy who is now starting instead of coming off the bench, who's just in a worse situation for his skill set, right? Coming off the bench has worked for him all season. Starting, he's competing for touches with all sorts of other guys. It's tougher for him. So not only does Tyrese Haliburton cause the Pacers to just not have the production of Tyrese Haliburton, one of the most efficient high-volume players in the league, a brilliant passer, an offensive engine, they also lose the production of several other players who are having good career years fitting together. They now fit worse and don't have the guy that makes them awesome every night. Granted, they make themselves awesome, but he helps make them awesome every single night on the court at the same time. So you get the idea here that you don't just lose Haliburton, you lose the benefits he gives other players as well. And the starting lineup has kind of fallen apart as a result, right? And so they shot really well in Milwaukee. That's the only thing saving them from just misery from deep in the games without Tyrese Haliburton, right? They have shot the ball awful from the outside in these games. They went 7 for 30 against Atlanta. They went 11 for 47 from deep against Memphis. And they shot okay, 12 for 33 against OKC, but they're not shooting well. They're getting worse attempts. They don't have Haliburton who can create his own. They don't have him to set them up. They're shooting worse. They're playing in transition more on defense because they're missing those shots. So, that's tougher for them. Their defensive rating's worth. Their turnovers are up because they don't have a guy who's very good at taking care of the ball. They had 23 today against OKC. They had a bunch against Atlanta, Memphis, right? That's hard to overcome. Like I always talk about, they need to win these possession battles. 19 turnovers against Memphis, for example, is not going to get it done. So, they've done some stuff good in the Atlanta game, right? They did some stuff in the possession battle. They slowed it down a bit. They've got to play like that to me, right? That allows their other guys to have more chances to find the best shot they can, right? That is what they need to do. They don't have the personnel right now to be the same identity team that they were when Tyrese Haliburton plays. And that's a big part of his absence. You lose the identity of the team. Transition, right? They are almost 19 points per game in transition on the season, like first in the league, right? In their losing streak since the Atlanta game, they're 12th in the league at 14 points per game. 15 points per game. Their identity is completely changed. They can't be that transition team, and you can see it beyond just the other team miss, let's run a fast break. When they play with Haliburton, when they're playing at their fastest, the ball goes out of bounds, boom, they sprint to get it. They throw it to the ref. They try to get in and play. That doesn't seem like it's happening as much right now, right? Their identity is sort of gone. Not an identity crisis, but it's just different. So they miss a lot of things with Tyrese Haliburton. It's hard to adjust a style on the fly in the middle of the season, especially with guys changing roles at the same time. But they miss Tyrese Haliburton, and they need solutions because if you dive into the advanced stats, oh boy, holy smokes, the Pacers in their last 4 games, offensive rating 106.7. That is the second worst in the NBA. Only the Brooklyn Nets, the Brooklyn Nets are the only team with the worst offensive rating in their last 4 games in the Pacers. Their defensive rating 22nd. They were above 20 for a while when they were rolling. 119.9 defensive rating. Gross, yuck, ugh. Net rating for the Pacers in their last 4 games, minus 13.2. That's second to last in the league. Only Houston is worse. The Pacers need Tyrese Haliburton back. They need to find a way to make a successful change. And I have one idea, and it's got to be a starting lineup change. I think there's something that makes sense for them to do that could balance out their rotation and help their starters look a little bit better. Let's talk about that after I tell you guys about betonline.net, the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football, college bowl season, basketball. They've got everything on there that you could possibly want at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those on BetOnline as well. It's the fastest and easiest way to get all your betting info. They've got lines up for the NFL playoffs for this upcoming week already. You got to go check it out. Head to that website today, betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, why not hop on over to Locked On Sports Today? Go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes, with the biggest stories in sports on Locked On Sports Today. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Here from the local experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's talk about the Pacers' new starting 5 without Tyrese Haliburton. It hasn't played a ton together, but they've had to make changes. Mathurin is starting in place of so what you really want to say is Mathurin is starting in place of Haliburton, right? That is technically man-to-man sub what has happened. What has really happened is Nembhard is starting at point guard instead of Haliburton, and Mathurin is starting on the wing instead of Nembhard. And that is effectively the change that the Pacers have made to their starting 5 without Tyrese Haliburton. There was some mixing and matching going on when they were without Nesmith and Turner, but that's the group that they've been going with. And I understand that decision from a team building perspective. I understand that decision from what the Pacers think they need without Tyrese Haliburton perspective, but I think the results say they do not need this. This is not the answer. This group doesn't work. They played OKC tonight. Let's just start there. That group, that lineup, Miles Turner, Buddy Hield, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Benedict Mathurin, played together for 10 minutes and 28 seconds. Right? That was the most played lineup for the Pacers, as your starting lineup typically is. They were minus 21. They scored 20 points in that 10 minutes. They gave up 41. That's awful. That is terrible. Their shot quality wasn't good. They weren't making them. They weren't defending. They did nothing, right? The Thunder starting 5, for reference, played 12 and a half minutes. It was a plus 20 for the night, right? They got smoked. The Pacers starting 5 did in this game. They couldn't score. They couldn't get stops. That doesn't work. There's a lot of talent, right? There's a lot of talent in the starting 5 the Pacers have, but not enough pieces to kind of connect it. And they tried different starters at the beginning of the season that didn't work. They found the connecting pieces that made it all gel. So what can the Pacers do, and what is wrong with their current lineup to make this all work? Let's start with what's wrong with their current group, because to me, when I look at this group, Nembhard, Hield, Mathurin backcourt, right? Some guys are forced to either not have the ball enough, right? You can't have, that's a lot of play finishers. Like Turner's been finishing plays well this year too, Nesmith as well. Like it's a lot of play finishers without a lot of play creation. Haliburton gives them a lot of both, and they don't have him. So guys are either forced to not have the ball enough in this group, right? Hield only taking 4 shots, and he only played 18 minutes, but like he can't get as many shots without someone to set him up. He's not a great self-create either. Or guys are overtasked with creating for others. Like I was kind of impressed with against the Hawks, specifically the very first game the Pacers played without Haliburton, and the best one they played. I was pretty impressed with some passes that Hield and Mathurin played. I have not had that feeling in the games since that game. Guys are kind of overtasked with creating for others, or they're not put in a position to finish as many plays as they have been when the rotation is balanced as it perfectly was. And that's kind of made things choppy, right? More self-starters in this group than like general creators and connector types. Nembhard can pass out of drives and make plays in traffic, and he's been a good setup man. He's got a lot of assists in these games, but he's not like diving all the way to the rim and this crazy good finisher there in a way that bends the defense and makes it so he can make kick outs and have other guys have open driving lanes. Like that really hasn't been there yet in a way where the ball's popping around and they're playing really fast like they do in the past, right? Their pace here clearly different. So, it just isn't right there. And with he's got the assists, he's got the creativity, but he doesn't have the rim finishing to really bend to the defense. So what they've done is they've put the best 5 guys out there to try to say, we don't need the creativity and all the creation. These are just the best, most talented 5. We'll keep up and our bench will win. And their bench has been playing fine. And this is the best 5 they had. And there's a good argument to saying, you know what? Let's just run our best 5 out there. But it's not working, right? It's not working. Even looking at the general stats. Let's not just look at this one game. That 5-man group before this game, Turner, Hield, Nembhard, Nesmith, Mathurin, minus 10 on the season. 25 total points scored. Right? Their offensive rating, 89.3. This is a small sample size. This is a really small sample size, to be fair, but that's really bad. Defensive rating, also horrible. 35 points conceded on 28 possessions, comes out to a defensive rating of 125. Again, we're talking about really, really small samples, but it hasn't worked for 5 straight games, and it's not just about the numbers. It's about how it looks. It's about the shots they generate. They haven't been good. So what can they do instead? Well, to me, I think the obvious change is one of Mathurin or Hield goes to the bench. And I know that fans have been dying for Mathurin to start all season, but the Pacers, for good reason, have kept him with the second unit, and that's that he fits better there. He gets better use. He gets way more usage there, and also better usage there, right? There's a lot of ripple effects to having in there. But if Hield went to the bench, that also might make sense with the way McConnell's playing and whipping passes around, and the way the bench unit has like no shooting right now. That would also make some sense. I think there's good arguments to both, but either way, one of them I think has to be there for a better connecting piece. And I say that because if you're not bending the defense, if your 5-man starting lineup is not very easily making your offense click and making stuff happen, if you're already struggling to score, then continue to do that, but put a better defender in who can make it so you're in transition more often, right? Maybe it's Chris Duarte who can be nosy pest and make some steals happen. Maybe it's O'Shea Brissett, right? One of those 2 guys can defend at a level that makes you go, maybe they get 1 or 2 more easy transition opportunities with their starting 5 and look like a more capable unit, right? Just trade some defense for offense for defense. Your offense is still going to be bad. At least your defense can sort of help balance things out. And then your bench is better because a self-starter is now with that group and a good play finisher if it's Hield. Whatever you want to do. I think that makes more sense with how they're playing. I don't know. You're not sacrificing offense to do that right now. There's not enough connectivity in the current starting 5. They haven't had enough, moments of success to make me go, oh, they just need to do this a little better, be a little more crisp. Like they just look not connected. So get a resourceful guy like Brissett in there, or an aggressive off the dribble guy recently like Duarte, who's been really struggling, but at least gives you a little more defense. I think that would balance out not just the starters, but the defense a little bit as well. And there's also maybe you go Jalen Smith, and then you're getting a lineup that you've actually used before in general with the Smith-Turner frontcourt pairing. Smith just didn't play, though. I included him in my notes because he started before, but I don't know that would be something they would consider. Either way, maybe that didn't work early in the season, but what they're doing right now certainly isn't working either. So these slowish starts are back. The bench has been carrying them a lot recently, and they've got to, I think, change the starting 5 in some way and try to do it in a way that won't hurt the bench. It's not easy because the bench has been good and you're taking someone out of it, but if it means your bench is McConnell, Jackson, Mathurin, and Brissett, or whatever, Duarte instead of Brissett, I think that still works just as well as what they've been doing. I don't know what the best solution is, personally. There's a lot of good arguments to be made for either Mathurin or Hield being the guy who goes to the bench and a couple other guys being the starter. If it were me making the decision myself, I would move Mathurin to the second unit and start Brissett at the 4 for a little bit, just to get some size on the floor, some mobile size on the floor. And then your second unit is McConnell, your shooting guard. In my case, would be Mathurin. In someone else's case, it could be someone else, Duarte, and then whatever center the second unit decides to use. You can bend all that around pretty easily, and Carlisle's pretty flexible, especially as the game progresses. But I think that is the best way to balance things and kind of fix the starting 5 woes that they've been having, because what they've been doing right now isn't working, and they've got some tough opponents coming up that they really have to find a way to succeed against, or else they could be in some trouble. They could drop under 500 for the first time in like a month since the Knicks beat them right before Christmas. We'll see how this goes. Tomorrow, we're talking Nuggets and team building with Ryan Blackburn. out of Denver. He covers the Nuggets and does an awesome job doing so. And we'll talk about a pairing that I kind of just referenced in this segment that has not been working for the Pacers. The numbers behind it. What can the Pacers do to maximize said pairing? But I don't want to spoil who it is just yet. If you're on YouTube watching, please comment. What can the Pacers do better without Tyrese Haliburton? They've got to get some wins. And thank you all so much for listening. I'm on Twitter at TEastNBA, and this podcast is on Twitter at LockedOnPacers. Hope you all had a fantastic day. We will see you tomorrow.